When we go in to talk to organizations, it's almost like going to the doctor. The doctor says, does this hurt? Does that hurt? And you go, no, no, no. Oh yeah, that hurts. And when we go into organizations, we're really trying to find what their challenges are, what their pain points are. If you don't know what changes your customers want to see, you're probably not close enough to your customers.
I were talking and I was a CEO looking at all this. You're like, okay, most of the stuff I already subscribe to has AI in it. As I'm thinking about new purchases, what would you advise me to ask about that AI component? What should I know?
People are so excited for AI that they will jump and buy solutions without having their CIO and their CFO sit down at the table and put together a firm business case on. When businesses operated back in the late 80s, early 90s, vastly different landscape.
Hello, I'm Jocelyn Houle, your host for Better Tech. Today, we're focused on driving digital transformation from vision to execution. And we're really excited to welcome back Eric Slus, who leads the Fractional CIO practice at Net at Work. Welcome, Eric.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So tell us a little bit, last time when we all met, we talked a little bit about digital transformation, especially for mid-market enterprise. But a lot's happened in the industry since then. So maybe you can kind of let us know what you're hearing from customers.
Yeah, so what we're hearing from customer is a reoccurring theme. It's really over the past years that businesses today are struggling to take AI from a concept and building it into an integrated solution that's built into their processes. And so we're finding that organizations, they know they need to adopt AI. They keep hearing about AI, but they don't know where to start, and they can't find resources internally or externally who can take the AI concept and translate it into a business solution that drives value. And that's where we're at.
Yeah, I got you. That's really a burning question in our industry right now. And I want to get into the detail there, but maybe we could just back up and kind of get some of the lay of the land really quick. First of all, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do at Net at Work.
Sure. So I'm a Chief Information Officer with Net at Work, and what I do is I lead our Fractional CIO Advisory group. And our responsibility is really helping organizations in the mid-market both plan and execute digital transformations.
And when you say mid-market, tell me how to think about that.
Yeah, it's interesting because, I talk to organizations that are $10 million a year in revenue and they think they're mid-market. And then I talk to organizations that do 90 million and they still think they're what we would call a small business. But for us, mid-market is really anywhere from 50 million in revenue up to 500 to 900 million. It really depends on really the mentality of the organization. We typically work with organizations who are looking to grow. When I talk to business owners or executives and they're saying, we're trying to go do 2 to 3% year over year revenue, we don't want to rock the boat that much. We're pretty happy with our progress. Those are great organizations, but we don't work with them. We work with those organizations. They're saying, we're trying to grow by 20% year over year. Here's our initiatives. Here's our strategies. We need help in these areas. Help us achieve our growth. And those are really the types of organizations. And so when you're talking about a $10 million a year business with those types of growth aspirations and that mentality, we do consider that mid-market because in 24 months, they're going to be a vastly different organization possibly, based on their growth trajectory.
Interesting. That sounds like an incredibly fun group of people to work with who are really looking to grow and trying to figure out how to do that. I've been in tech a long time, so probably they're looking at technical solutions for the most part to help drive that goal of growing for the most part. And so, again, just kind of help us understand, people also say like digital transformation or when you're talking about being successful. So I want to start at the end. Can you help me understand like some sort of pillars or basic concepts of like what makes a successful digital transformation? If I'm like a CEO, how should I be thinking about that?
Yeah, so digital transformation is kind of this fuzzy, glamorous term that a lot of people know about it, people have heard of it, but what does it really mean? So let's deconstruct what digital transformation means. From our perspective, there's really 4 elements of digital transformations. We've done a lot of research and soul searching that says, for most mid-market organizations, what would a successful digital transformation look like? And we believe that organizations in the mid-market should really focus on 4 different areas. The first is streamlining your processes. If I was to ask you, does your organization work efficiently? Do you work effectively? No. Most organizations are totally a mess from a process standpoint. Accounting, all the way through supply chain or whatever their business is in, there's efficiencies to be gained. The second element is digitizing paperwork. When I talk to a lot of executives and business owners, I can see vast amounts of papers in their office sitting on their desk behind them. And so when we're talking about paperwork that you're using to run your critical business processes, most of that can be digitized, and there's efficiencies to be had. The third element of digital transformations that we see are enabling your employees. Do your employees have the right tools, the right training, the right org structure that they need to do their jobs effectively? Most of the time, no, they don't. If you ask the employees, no, I do this, I spend my time, I waste my time, I got to go to this department, it's not efficient. The last area that we focus on for digital transformations is about the customer experience. Are you providing your customers the type of experience that they want to receive? And it's a very simple question. Ask your customers, how can we improve? How can we do better? Your customers are probably going to give you 3 or 4 or even more different things that they want to see from you. So how do we improve that type of experience? And so if we really look at it, it's about your people, it's about your processes and your customers, and putting together a better framework and methodology for improving those areas. And that's all facilitated through technology. And that's what we think of as digital transformation.
Okay, so let me say it back to you to make sure I understand.
Sure.
It's really these, processes. It's enablement of individuals to do their job. It's documents, which I really want to get into, like paperwork documents. And then it's really threading that customer experience needle correctly and in a way that makes sense for your business. So those are the 4 big pillars, right?
Those are the 4 big pillars. Yes.
Okay. Well, now I have a better understanding. And, if you're coming into an organization, before we kind of talk about all the great stuff you can do with digital transformation, maybe we could go color by color and you could tell us the inside scoop of things that you see that you're like, oh, here's a place that here's a concern in this area of, say, documents and paperwork that I see quite frequently and maybe isn't obvious to, just the regular business person.
Sure. So let's start off with streamlining your processes. If I ask organizations, like I said, do you operate effectively? Do you feel like you're operating as efficiently as you possibly can? Just from an organizational gut sense checkpoint, most people say no, totally not. And so what we do is when we come into organizations, we start by looking at their people, their processes, and their technology. We use that methodology and that framework. And so from the process angle, we evaluate where are you on a maturity level for your different processes, AR, AP. It's a manufacturing organization for purchasing, for example, sales. So we go through and we evaluate from a 1 through 5 standpoint on a maturity level, like, are you a 1, which is really a startup type mentality of an organization, or are you more of along the 5s, which is a best of breed, best of class organization? And so from a process standpoint, that's typically what we go through and do from our evaluation process.
Do you ever find that people think they have terrible processes, but they actually have great, like very strong ones in certain areas? Are some people too hard on themselves?
Very rarely. We find it's usually the opposite end, whereas they have bad processes but think their process is pretty okay. Somebody suspects their processes are inefficient, and that's the reason that we're there. Usually it's the department head who thinks, oh no, we're doing what we need to be doing, but they've worked there for 20 or 30 years. They've never seen anything differently, and they've never gone out and tried to sit there and say, how are we focusing on getting better? Most people in mid-market are focused on operational day-to-day aspects. So they're not going through from a strategic sense saying, what do we need to do to get better?
Okay. And so the challenge is that they just not always need to know the process and they feel blocked by it. Are there any other sort of nooks and crannies you always look at of here's where a process is breaking down?
Yeah. So from our end, when we talk cross-departmentally, we find it's very interesting. When we go and visit with businesses and we actually get on site, it's evident that most organizations don't actually do cross-departmental communications. And often we'll be sitting in the room with them and they're like, oh, I didn't know that you did this in accounting. And one common theme with manufacturing companies is the accountants never go down to the shop floor. And so when you're doing costing on your products, a lot of time there's a disconnect between what the accountants believe is happening versus what the actual processes on the floor are from the products they're pulling and choosing to put into the manufacturing process. One of the key themes we see is that costs are totally out of whack, is that what they think is a profitable product is actually not as profitable as that they thought because their cost inputs are wrong.
Oh, because there's like hidden costs hiding in the crannies.
Or they're using different material than what the accountants thought that they were using in the first place, for example.
That's interesting.
It's very interesting.
I have just one more question about this because process is so interesting. And, I have a software background. So because you're always kind of finding out, like, what are we coding up? And oftentimes it's so hard to find out because people think they know and then maybe they don't know. And so my question to you would be, when you do make all these findings, you go through and you're like, here's where, it needs the most work. Here's where the impacts are driving costs. I'm just curious, like, how do you get that information? Like, how do you fix that as working? Maybe that's not, part of your mandate, but like, how do you get started?
Yeah. So when we go in to talk to organizations, it's almost like going to the doctor, and the doctor says, does this hurt? Does that hurt? And you go, no. Oh yeah, that hurts. And when we go into organizations, we're really trying to find what their challenges are, what their pain points are, because things that work efficiently, you hear less friction about. When you start saying, oh, this is such a pain to deal with, this takes so much time, that's really where we're trying to spend the bulk of our time to drive efficiencies.
Interesting. Well, I really like hearing about the challenges under that process component. Is there anything I forgot to ask about that we should all know about the process pillar?
Businesses are run and built on processes. And I know it's going back to the basics, but everybody really tries to bypass streamlining your processes, documenting your processes, and jumping to a technology solution that will magically fix everything. But in my opinion, it all goes back to, what's your process? What are you doing today? How can we make it better? And then try to find the right type of technology to facilitate that and automate that and build out workflows. And so the hidden message here is, take the time and invest and define what your processes are and document your processes.
Okay, interesting. So I feel like what I'm taking away from this is, if somebody put me in charge of a hugely overwhelming digital transformation process or project, it's a great starting point, right? To just really get into the weeds on the process.
Exactly. I totally agree.
Okay, interesting. This might be a related topic. I would almost say paperwork is the child of the process, but you mentioned it as a separate category. What are the challenges with paperwork?
Yeah, I do believe it's a separate category. So going through, when you talk to different businesses and you start walking through their processes and the amount of paperwork, how can we digitize that? Because just taking that paperwork and taking that and digitizing it is a benefit in and of itself. For example, we'll often go to organizations and we'll talk to the purchasing department, for example, and they say, well, I put a purchase order in, we send it off to our supplier, and then I print it off for our records. And we're going, okay, why are you doing that? It's in the system. Well, this is what we've always been doing. I've worked here for 20 years, and we got a new system 10 or 15 years ago. And so what we find a lot of times is that their processes might be right, but they're handling the paperwork in the wrong way. They're printing off documents, for example, that don't even need to be printed off. They're already in a system. It's just that they haven't been trained effectively to stop doing that. And the other element of is sometimes these paperwork goes with throughout processes. It's cross processes, cross systems. So how can we take identifying specific elements that still exist on physical paper, and what's the best way to take that and digitize it?
Interesting. I want to talk about that more in terms of AI. But sure. I think the last one that you mentioned was the customer experience.
Yes.
Again, I just think about this from just you taking over this massive endeavor. What are the challenges? Where should you be looking for those potholes?
We start with, what are your customers looking for? What do they want you to do differently? And unfortunately, when we start asking executive teams that question, like, what are the top 3 changes your customers want to see? They don't know. And half the time they don't know. They cannot articulate that to us. And that's a problem that is evident, right? If you don't know what changes your customers want to see, you're probably not close enough to your customers to begin with. And so we start by talking to the customers and having our clients talk to their customers. What changes do you want to see? And for most organizations that ship product or ship material, whether it's B2B, B2C, how can we improve the information experience, the types of information that you're providing to your customer? Everybody does e-commerce today, and everybody expects to get like an Amazon type experience when buying online, whether that's B2B, B2C. But most businesses don't provide that digital experience. So how do we get that type of information to your customers and improve their overall experience? And that's one area that we focus on a lot, is e-commerce and the information side of things.
Well, that's really interesting, and I want to kind of get into that because it's so front and center right now with AI. I feel like I forgot one of the pillars, though. We talked about process.
We talked about process. We talked about paper and customers, and last is the employees.
Right. Sometimes that's true, unfortunately.
It usually is. Employees, unfortunately, are the afterthought.
I just evidenced that right here. But that's not quite right? Because they're really the center of all the productivity. And certainly if you want to make any changes in this spot, right? I also want to hear about it because I feel like that's where the emotions come out, is working with improving the lives and enabling the employees.
Yeah. And so when we do this, we often ask employees, so what do you need to do how can we make your life easier? What types of tools, do you need to make your life easier? And they'll tell you, right? They know what they spend their time on in invaluable areas. This is tedious. I don't know why I do this. No one even looks at this report. So often, a lot of organizations, like I said, they keep focusing on day-to-day operational aspects, whereas they don't have people coming in saying, how can we do better? How can we do things a little bit differently? And so when we talk about the employee experience, and I've said this before, we'll come into organizations and it's 2024 outside, but when we come in, they're still operating like it's 1997. Who wants to work in an organization like that? It's very hard to hire the right type of people today, from shop floor employees to accountants. There's hiring struggles across the board today. And so making it a better employee experience for these employees, give them the right tools, give them the right technology, the right training, the right org structure, because you need these people. You need to be able to both attract and retrain and retain talent. That's what the whole goal is.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that's an interesting goal as part of digital transformation. And I do think people want to work at a place that is more modern, where they're gaining skills and spending time on the things they're good at.
Exactly. Yes.
So that really makes sense to me. Everything you're talking about is kind of making me itch to talk about what, as these organizations are moving from vision to execution. I mean, I feel like we should talk about the impact of AI because that is one of the big use cases, right? For how do we get out of test? How do we start productionalizing? Can you tell me what mid-market is concerned about or thinking about this AI space?
Yeah. So I think most organizations in the mid-market, they know AI is out there. They've gone to conferences. They keep hearing about AI. Yet, they don't have the resources, the budget, the expertise, the talent to even go out and tackle anything AI related. They don't know where to start. And so when we talk to mid-market businesses, they keep saying, well, how can I use AI? How can I use AI? And what we're advising them is, let's not try to put the solution to the problem. Let's go out and find problems and find the right solution to solve that. And a lot of times I think there's a element that they misunderstand AI. They're probably using AI as an organization today. It's just maybe an accounts payable automation solution with built-in OCR and AI capabilities. But that's not glamorous sounding, nor is it front and center of their minds, but they're likely using AI today. The other area of AI is, how do we start writing policies and procedures for the employees on how to use AI correctly? because your employees are definitely using Chat GPT and other associated elements. What are your employees doing with that data? How are you mandating that? Most organizations are behind the curve on putting those policies together.
And it seems like this should be obvious, but like, what are some of the concerns of having like unsanctioned use of LLMs?
Sure. From my standpoint, it's putting confidential customer information, employee information, data, product information. So we see this is still fairly a brand new product over the past 12 months in terms of everyday people adopting its usage. And so I think organizations need to think about, well, how do we want you to engage with these types of solutions, if at all, and what are you allowed to do versus not allowed to do? And some organizations don't want their employees to use these solutions at all, whereas other organizations are opening it up a little bit, but they want to keep their proprietary information, confidential information off of those systems.
Yeah, this isn't, I just want to riff on this for a second because, one of the,
Sure.
in AI is, great new revenue stream is often this like high value proprietary data. I'm going to guess mid-market is sitting on top of quite a bit of that because this is like your large car parts organization, right? These are places that you have like pretty specific industry domain knowledge that's very high value now.
Correct. And especially from data, there's a lot of organizations that want to use AI, but I start by asking them to do data mining, for example. Well, what's the state of your data? Is your data clean? Is it built in the right way? And a lot of organizations are so far down in the maturity of having their data built and their processes defined in a certain way for them to even start using AI in those domains, unfortunately.
I'm really glad you mentioned that because I love that you break out the paperwork and documents side of it. That's the sort of unstructured, semi-structured data. And if you're not technical and you're an audience member, it's very rich for AI use cases, but it's often very disorganized and difficult to deal with technically.
Exactly, which makes it more expensive to implement, and probably the results are murkier at best. Your ROI is going, and the risk associated with it is going to be less than if your data is highly structured and usable, right?
Yeah, that's interesting. And I guess they're concerned about IP leaving the organization through, and they've got I think have the right kind of advice, which is we're looking for a use case we can solve with this technology rather than like the turnaround. I think there's a little bit of like keeping up with the Joneses among CEOs.
There is. And like I said, when we'll start talking to CEOs and other executives, CFOs, for example, and they talk about AI, it's like, well, you're already using it in your accounts payable platform. I don't know. And then, you can see their eyes. You're already using AI. It's not the glamorous form that you keep hearing about at these conferences, but actually it's far cheaper. It's already in a built-in solution. And what we're starting to see in the mid-market, and this is true for the enterprise segment, is that more and more business applications that are tailored for mid-market, ERP, CRM, are arriving with built-in AI technology, built-in automation technology, workflow technology. And so we're seeing that today, but even in the next 12 to 24 months, we're going to start seeing better solutions coming out with better AI capabilities.
Yeah, this is a question I think that's I just like to get your opinion. It may not come from your past experience with this, but it is kind of interesting. You've got all these companies coming, you know what? Now we're AI. We got this AI, and some were before, but now everybody is. So your CRM. Are there any if I were talking and I was a CEO looking at all this, you're like, okay, most of the stuff I already subscribe to has AI in it. As I'm thinking about new purchases, what would you advise me to ask about that AI component? What should I know that's baked in already?
That's a great question. So when we talk about AI, when we're doing any sort of software or vendor evaluation for a new product, we always ask, what's the amount of R&D going into this product year over year? What are your policies for data protection? Where is the data being housed? If depending on your industry and depending on industry regulations, you might have to have specific practices and policies around this data protection, for example. So I always think those are great questions to ask, as well as just general support questions. If we have issues, can we call you 24/7, or are you only available, or if they're a European company and they're only on European hours, then that's something to consider as well. I go back to the basics where I advise people, ask them the normal questions that you would typically ask any software vendor, and always come up with the business case for doing it. People are so excited for AI that they will jump and buy solutions without having their CIO and their CFO sit down at the table and put together a firm business case on, here's why we're doing it, here's the risks of not doing it, here's the risks for doing it, resources we need, the budget, the expected ROI. They're not doing that. They're going out and buying solutions. And unfortunately, they're buying solutions without clear expectations on what the business impact is.
I love that. I think everyone knows that. It's like, you know it, but then you have to rehear it and remind yourself, right? It's like reading a nutrition book. You're like, I kind of knew it, but I have to just connect with the information. And so I really like that, and particularly with AI, because it's non-deterministic. I mean, once your stuff goes in there, you can't trace it in the same way. So
exactly.
That's really, I think, good to pause and reconsider that. That's why you work with a CIO.
Exactly.
So I don't know if you have any case studies that you might want to share with us about, how, and in particular, I'm particularly interested about beginnings and ends, like a case study where, you had to kick off a digital transformation to move it off the whiteboard, or maybe you had to call it done and present it back to a CEO. I don't know if you have any top of mind examples.
Yeah, for us, we had a manufacturing company, and they were trying to grow, like all of our clients are. And so they were doing $70 million a year in revenue. They were primarily operating in the U.S. with one manufacturing plant, but they wanted to grow to be a $100 million company within 5 years' time. And so how are they going to do that? Because it goes back to, well, we're not operating efficiently. We can't get product out the door as quickly as possible. And our purchasing department is a mess. We'll often have orders and we're starting to build only to find that we don't have the right type of raw materials. And so something that we could get done by Friday, we're going to get done 2 weeks after that because we have to order the raw material because we have stock shortages. We thought we had the material. It's not out there in the warehouse, for example. And so what we did for them is we put together digital transformation plan. We put together a digital transformation roadmap, and they were operating on what I would call a legacy ERP solution. What does that mean? It means that their ERP was developed 30 plus years ago, and they're still running on it, even though they implemented it 15 years ago. It's a 30-year-old solution. It's been updated and upgraded throughout the years, but it's still antiquated. And so what we did is we put in a new ERP system, Sage X3, which is really purposely built for this type of manufacturing organization. And what did we do? Like I said, we look at the processes, because you don't want to switch out an old tech system for a new tech system and do the exact same thing that you're doing today. Mm-hmm. You're going to get the same exact outcome. So when we started this process, we said, well, okay, what's the right type of solution that we're looking for? What do we want? What are our processes today? How do we want to reimagine those processes? What's the most efficient processes we could have? And then we went out and found the right solution, Sage X3, for those specific processes, those future design processes. And so we put the system in place in conjunction with best-in-class processes. And so all the hiccups that they had from their purchasing department, the quality issues, all of that went away. That helped them become, and they're still along their transformation journey. They're 3 years into it, but right now they're doing $91 million a year in revenue. And also we put in a pricing program for them. They had not consistently, as a B2B organization, increased prices year over year for the past 5 years. They just had not been doing that. And so what we did is we helped them with the new ERP system put together a pricing structure that drove minimum 5% year over year price increases, which directly drives to the bottom line for EBITDA, right? And some of their products, actually, they increased prices for their one-off products by over 20%. So a lot of that drove top-line growth as well. Really, and so they're into this. I'm sorry for interrupting, but they're into year 4 of their 5-year journey.
I love what you're saying, because it's a successful story, and it's hard to be that's ERP implementation. That's tough work.
Yes. I think the statistics show that up to 70% of ERP implementations fail.
Yes, 70%.
And most people have been through those types of implementations. They would believe that number.
Yeah, it's tough for a million reasons. But I also think it's great when you're working with your leadership inside your organization to start with those use cases and challenges that are specific and map it out to the solution. I think I like that because you can kind of come back around and point out like how this is better based on what they told you before. And then, ta-da, you've also got these financial results. So, I think tying the bow around it is just an important part of maintaining support for these.
I totally agree. It validates the whole reason for the investment, because during a major technology deployment that has people changes, process changes, tech changes, everybody's asking themselves, why are we doing this again? Why are we doing it? If we don't put together a business case and a change management and a communication plan, that starts to catch up to companies where they start struggling to answer that question. But if you've done all that pre-work, you can go back and say, well, remember, these are the reasons why we're doing it. Here's what we said. We knew this would be a challenge, but we're going to get to the finish line, and here's what we expect to see. And that's a much better case to tell employees.
Yeah, it's worth taking the time. That makes sense. And so I want to get into the weeds a little bit, because I think it is interesting to get your opinions on, like, how do you, if you're running ERP is a perfect example. You've got multiple lines of business at the table, multiple agendas. Like, how do you keep the communications going and keep the support going across all those interests? Just sort of practically speaking.
It takes a lot of change management and a lot of communications. So when we do these large-scale types of initiatives, we always recommend putting in place a change management program, a formal OCR program. And I ask people a lot, do you have, that are in the midst of these transitions, do you have somebody doing change management? And they say, well, I kind of am, or, we're kind of all doing it together, which tells me, no, you're not. Unfortunately, a lot of our clients come to us when they're in the midst of a technology transformation because they're having issues. They're struggling. They don't know what to do. A lot of organizations going through an ERP implementation have to hit the pause button and reassess what they're doing and why it's not working out. And so one of the leading things that we see is, well, there's no one running change management. There's no one responsible for putting together training programs to train your employees on these new processes, on these new systems. And there's no communication plan in place to communicate why we're doing this, what's expected of the employees, how their roles and responsibilities may change throughout this process.
And so you may have the same answer to my next question, but I just feel, these multi-year complex digital transformations, there's a lot of emotions that come into it. Not every employee is like, yes, my life is better now, right? Some people may be radically changed in ways they don't like. I guess how do you keep the political support over multi-years when people might be unhappy? And then how do you move people? If there are unhappy people, how do you deal with it?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. When we're doing these types of initiatives, executive support is one of the key reasons for success. If you don't have support across the executive team, then their departments and everybody that works under them are going to fall. They're going to fall by the wayside. So getting alignment with the executive group is really key to driving the communication as to why we're doing this, why this is important, why this is beneficial for the company, why we need you to be involved. Now, to your question, not everybody is going to be willing to go on this journey. And so what we're trying to do is prepare those people as best as possible. And I think there's this sense that, there's so many people who are going to resist this. Most of the time, I find it's the opposite, is that if you do things correctly, if you have a communication plan and you can communicate why, it's hard for people to say, well, I don't want to do this. Because if we're saying this is going to benefit the company, this is going to benefit all of us, it's going to give you better tools. We heard you that you don't have the right tools to do your job. Your job's tedious, you get frustrated. or trying to solve that for you, that's hard for them to raise their hand and say, I'm not going to do this now.
I like that. Yeah, I think people are willing to take some pain if they feel like they're on your team and that they know what's coming, and I also like this idea of executive championship and like really getting that support. That is a place where I'm going to add my 2 cents, see if you agree with this.
Sure.
Like, it's very easy to forget to continue to bolster that support. I think it's so important to build in those touch points, those, connection points, because, these executives are busy. They forgot what they said 6 months ago. Do you have any tips and tricks for keeping those champions like in the mix?
Yeah. So normally when we do these digital transformations, there's usually a cadence meeting for all the executives, whether that's every other week or monthly. We put together a cadence meeting where everybody's in the loop. We review progress against the roadmap, how we're tracking against results, issues, risks, and then we talk about the communication plan. And there's different communication strategies for some of our transformation initiatives that we've put together. We'll have executives do different channels. They'll put together emails. We've even done video recordings where the CEO does a video and they release it via email to all their employees. They'll talk at meetings, all hands meetings. So it's really putting together a variety of formats to communicate this and making sure that it's top of mind for the executives. And we build a plan just for the executives on communication. Here's what we expect you to communicate. We will draft the communications for you, or an OCM consultant will, because they don't have the time, and we want to make sure it's on point, on target across the organization in terms of what's being communicated. So we'll draft it for them, and then they'll distribute it themselves or communicate themselves, whatever that channel is.
That's advanced level chess. I really like that because
we try. Yeah, we try.
I think that is, that's a bit me. So when I'm telling you something, I'm just assuming you're taking it back to your organization. But that assumption isn't always right. And then,
correct.
It's kind of stopped in the room. And then you don't have that nice, like, sort of virtuous circle of people knowing what's happening and how it's going to play out. So that's such a great suggestion to make sure that they have what they need to communicate beyond the executive meeting. That's I like that a lot.
And that's why it's critical to hire or at least outsource OCM consultants or hire an OCM person internally. That's why it's so critical to have a person, a body, a full-time equivalent doing that, because it is a full-time job.
Yeah, that's right. I think we all try and tuck that in around the size. And it doesn't. Certainly for the beginning, this kickoff, something like this, it doesn't work. Well, I want to ask you some big picture questions before we wrap up. But is there anything I forgot to ask you, or you want to make sure that leaders who are taking on digital transformation right now know?
Yeah, I think the main thing with digital transformations is these are difficult journeys for any organization to embark on. And I liken it to, like, if I was going to climb Mount Everest, I would need to train. Right. I would need to get training. I need to get the right gear. I need to get the right mindset. Once I get to Everest, I need to have the right guides to take me up the mountain and back down. And so it's very similar with digital transformations, is that there's different components of it. There's the planning component where you need to do strategic planning and make sure it aligns with where you're going as an organization overall, put together strategies that are digital strategies, and then put together a roadmap, which is the different initiatives to help you from a digital standpoint get to that future vision. And the one area that I always see organizations hiccup when they're starting these journeys is they don't have the right guides in place to take them along the journey. And they never invested in the planning phase. So often organizations will want to invest in technology, and buying the tech is the easy part. Figuring out the processes and getting your people bought into the changes, that's difficult. So first, my advice to organizations is don't discount the planning that's involved for going through a digital transformation. Secondly, make sure that you focus on the people and the processes of your customers. The tech's the easiest stuff. We can find tech that fits whatever you need it to do, but figuring out what you need that tech to do, that's where organizations hiccup. And third, make sure that you have the right type of person, a transformation executive, to lead you through this transformation journey. And I would argue that it's really not a technology person you're looking for. It's business person who has deep expertise in how to leverage technology to achieve business goals. That's really what we're talking about.
Interesting. Yeah, I love all that. Thank you for sharing that with our audience too, because I think this is my last question to you is, so much is changing right now. I know there's a ton of other technology, there's ERP, there's supply chain, that's, it's mostly like data and AI that we're going to see over the next year, I think, in different modes. And like, where are these organizations going to be in their digital transformation in 18 or 24 months? Where do you think their focus is going to be compared to now?
I think for most organizations that are operating on what I would call legacy business applications like warehouse management, ERP solutions, CRM, they're going to need to update these solutions because a lot of them are nearing end of life. And I talk to organizations all the time. They're like, well, we implemented this back in 2015. And our consultants are saying we're using it correctly, but it just doesn't feel like we're getting as much out of the solution as we want to be. And I tell them, okay, well, let's look at the solution. It was literally developed in the late 80s. And it was launched in 1990, 91. And so even though it's been upgraded and updated over the years, it's still a 30-year-old platform plus. So when you're talking about how you using it correctly, yeah, you probably are getting the most out of it because the architecture is old. When businesses operated back in the late 80s, early 90s, vastly different landscape. And so when I talk to them, talk about let's look at the modern solutions. Look at modern ERP solutions that have built-in AI. They have workflow. They have automation solutions. A lot of your pain points are going to go away. You're using antiquated systems. That's holding you back. So I think we're going to see a lot of organizations that are getting rid of their legacy applications, their legacy systems, and going towards more modern, capable solutions that aren't fancy, but they have all those built-in capabilities with how businesses operate today. Secondly, and I think this is the most exciting front in the AI space, is I believe we're going to start seeing organizations using and thinking of AI very differently than they do today. I believe we'll start seeing organizations viewing AI not so much as a technology, but as an employee or a coworker within them. So when we start talking about, well, how can we use AI? How can we use AI for this or in this department? I think as organizations start to use AI, they'll start to view it as more of an employee and even giving it a human name. Let's say its name is Frank the AI. And so when we start changing and we're talking about Frank as a team member, well, could Frank do this? Because this is very tedious. It's a defined process. We have to take this data and turn it into this report. Can Frank do this? And I think that's going to be an exciting development that we're going to see over the next 2 to 3 years as organizations viewed AI less as technology and more as a team member as they adopt it more and more.
Well, that's a very interesting new view. I love that. And I think that's probably right. That sounds correct. Eric, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a great conversation, and you've already appeared twice. I think that we probably will have you back again. This is super helpful.
Thank you for having me.